Okay, good morning. The subcommittee will come to order, and I just want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today and coming to testify before our subcommittee, especially on the topic of career preparation and the importance of maximizing student employment and earnings potential. Look forward to hearing from each of you from your different perspective as to what you have identified that works for students and what we should bear in mind as we evaluate the programs in the subcommittee's jurisdiction. In education, whether it be a 2-year, whether it be a 4-year, whether it be other credentials, it's likely to be one of the most large, or one of the largest investments an individual will make in their entire lifetime. In fact, it's an investment in themselves, and it's an investment in their future. Students rightfully expect to get a good return on their investment by moving up the economic ladder, finding a job in their chosen industry, and being able to provide for themselves and also to provide for their families. It's no secret that college costs can be high. As I mentioned, many of us have experienced this in our own families, and each year the federal government provides more than $100 billion in grants and loans to help students pay for college. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, projected that the federal government would issue about $90 billion in new student loans for 2025 alone, with roughly half going to undergraduates or parents of undergraduates, and the other half going to graduate students. In total, 43 million borrowers currently have a total of 1.6 trillion. Yeah, 1.6 trillion in outstanding federal student loans. About half of these borrowers owe less than $20,000. About 3/4 owe less than $40,000. And these amounts are probably surprising to some because it's far below what sometimes is featured in the mainstream media. Financing higher education, both for the federal government and the individual, is a significant investment. Borrowers expect it to be worth it on the other side of graduation with expanded job opportunities and also with higher pay. However, that is only one side of the equation. Taxpayers also deserve to know that their money has been well spent. For 2025, Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, expects the government to lose 18 cents for every dollar it lends in 2025. In the recent era of higher inflation, which is brought on by a lot of unnecessary federal spending, students would benefit even more from cost-effective ways to obtain the knowledge and skills needed to advance in the labor market. College can and does translate into financial benefits that make their time and their money well worth it, but for too many, it is not a universal experience. And for many, completing a degree is a very big hurdle. According to the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center, the overall 6-year graduation rate in 2024 was about 61%. What means nearly 2 in 5 students who enrolled in 2018 did not finish within 6 years. And by 8 years, the completion rate was only a few percentages higher. So I think you would agree that these rates are unacceptable, and we can and should be doing better for our students. Right now, there are 8 million jobs unfilled in the country. However, that is just with 7 million unemployed individuals looking for work. While labor force participation among people in their prime working years has rebounded, overall participation still lags pre-pandemic levels, and even then, participation had generally been trending lower than just a decade or two earlier. Small businesses regularly report difficulty finding qualified applicants for available jobs, and there are concerns about shortages in key industries such as manufacturing, especially if a mismatch between the in-demand jobs and workers with the necessary skills persists. Thankfully, there are innovative leaders focused on student outcomes, and I'm pleased that we'll be able to hear from some of those leaders today about what they have found in working for students, including the perspective of private industry and community colleges. I think many of us have heard from businesses in each of our districts about the need for skilled workers in high-demand fields. whether that be healthcare, whether it be manufacturing or construction trades. Employers have a strong pulse on the current and the future workforce needs, and we will hear today from a company about programs that have developed to educate students and develop talent. I'd also like to highlight that we will hear from a community college that is in the district that I represent, Wallace State Community College, and it serves students from a variety of backgrounds and goals. Some seek a certificate, others an associate's degree, and still others plan to transfer to four-year institutions. Some are currently in high school where they have a dual enrollment, while others are right out of high school. Others are older, and some are trying to change careers and have families and work responsibilities as well. And I look forward to hearing about the continued success of this school, Wallace State Community College, and how it is focused on improving students' outcomes, including retention, completion, earnings, and employment opportunities. Before I turn to the ranking member, Ms. DeLauro, for her remarks, I will introduce our panel of witnesses so that when we conclude, you can go ahead and begin. First, we have Mr. Preston Cooper, who is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Welcome, good to have you here. His research focuses on the return on investment of different types of higher education. Next, we will hear from Dr. Vicki Karlowicz, president of Wallace State Community College in Hanceville that I referred to as earlier. I look forward to hearing from an education leader from the district I represent and about how your institution works to increase student success. And we will also hear from Mr. Dennis Parker, a consultant in North American Regional Talent Development at Toyota, and who will tell us about the successful approach Toyota has taken to develop that talent. And last, but certainly not least, we will hear from Mary Alice McCarthy, Senior Director of the Center on Education and Labor at New America, whose expertise includes college and career readiness, credentialing, and workforce development. I know you all are all very busy, so I appreciate you taking time to be with us here this morning. And at this time, I'd like to turn to the committee's ranking member for any remarks that you would like to make. So, Ranking Member DeLauro, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing on partnerships, collaboration between community colleges and the private sector that can best prepare today's students for tomorrow's workforce, which is a noble cause and one which we want to pay attention to. My thanks to the witnesses, to Mr. Cooper, Dr. Karlowicz, great, Mr. Parker, and welcome to the Labor, Health, Human Services, and Education Subcommittee, and Dr. McCarthy, welcome back. Not lost on me that we gathered today on the verge of an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education. Monday night, President Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency terminated $1 billion in education department contracts and awards. That includes dozens of contracts awarded by the Institute of Education Sciences. That's the department's independent research and statistics panel that tracks school performance nationwide. So without IES's critical work, parents, educators, policymakers are left in the dark when trying to compare student and school-wide achievement. Mr. Musk also canceled a national study on how we can improve elementary school students' math skills, along with several grants to train and support more educators of color. They are taking a wrecking ball to the welfare of children in school and their ability to learn. It is unconscionable, I believe immoral, and it is unlawful. That is only where they began, because they are coming for community colleges next. Last week, President Trump reiterated that his top goal for his Secretary of Education, the nominee, Linda McMahon, was to, and this is a quote, do a great job and put yourself out of a job, end quote. I refuse to let this hearing be a distraction from where House Republicans want to go. The Department of Education is fundamental to the American dream. And that will be demonstrated by our hearing today. So let's begin. Today's hearing is on a critical matter. How can we best ensure that today's secondary and post-secondary education students are studying, entering fields that best line up with the job market that they will find when they graduate? How does public education do better as a ladder of opportunity? How can it play the role that it did for our Italian, Irish, Polish, and other parents historically? I am delighted that the subcommittee is revisiting this topic. We last held a hearing on this in 2021, where we discussed evidence-based strategies to support job seekers, including the Strengthening Community College Training Grant Program, created and funded by this subcommittee. We created this program in my first year as chair of this subcommittee because we know that community colleges are often best positioned to support local workforce development needs. Towns, regions around the country, urban, rural, small and large, community colleges are critical institutions for fostering an educated population, a highly skilled workforce. They have the best sense of both the needs of local industry and the unique skills and talents of local students. My district, around New Haven, Connecticut, we have 3 community colleges: Gateway in New Haven, Middlesex in Middletown, Naugatuck Valley in Waterbury. I've worked extensively with all 3 colleges for years, seen firsthand the transformational impact these institutions have on the lives and the futures of those that they serve. Not everyone needs a 4-year degree, but everyone does need the education necessary to find good-paying jobs that provide economic security for themselves and their families. Community colleges provide a more cost-effective option over other alternatives. I'm proud that this subcommittee has supported community colleges and workforce development in a bipartisan way in the past. But I fear that those days may be behind us. We are 4.5 months past the end of the fiscal year without a labor, health, and human services education bill that can become law. But the funding cuts in the year 2025 labor HHS education bill that has been proposed by the majority will take the wrecking ball to programs that help align post-secondary education with workforce needs. There is a proposal of a cut of $1.7 billion from the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity State Grants, slash investments for youth job training, adult job training programs that prepare our lower-income neighbors for the workforce. Without these programs aligning students and adults with available job opportunities, we will have a less skilled workforce, higher unemployment, greater strain on safety net programs. The majority has proposed to cut student financial aid by over $1 billion, eliminate the supplemental education opportunity grants for 833,000 students, get rid of the 330,000 youngsters who do federal work-study positions that help to finance their post-secondary education. Finally, the total elimination of a program that helps student parents afford childcare while they attend community college classes. That puts education further out of the reach for families that need it the most for their own economic security. I'm disheartened, to say the least, to see my colleagues across the aisle take aim at the programs that help their own constituents, advance their education, programs that grow local economies, improve the livelihoods of families. And when we sit down to negotiate a full-year funding bill that can reach 218 votes, which the House Republicans' proposal cannot, I look forward to maintaining this funding that allows working people to climb up the ladder. This committee, this Congress, should be focused on finishing the full-year appropriations bills. We now stand less than 5 weeks away from March 14th deadline without so much as a top-line agreement. I think the American people are demanding help with the cost of living, the single biggest issue that faces them today. And we can do that here. This committee has the incredible power to change lives and to help the middle class. We can help make education affordable, make it easier to succeed in the workforce through our funding bills. Unfortunately, the pressing need to finish these full-year bills is not even the most urgent challenge to our federal education priorities. The Trump administration, and maybe the Musk administration and his Doge underlings, it is unclear to me who's calling the shots in the White House, are squaring their sights on the Department of Education. The Department of Education, created by an act of Congress, funded by appropriations bills passed by Congress, signed into law, ensures that no matter the wealth of their family, that does not have what they have in terms of their economic wealth, or whether they have a disability or other disadvantage, every single child in this country has the opportunity to obtain an education and dream for a better life for their kids. It is the embodiment of what Horace Mann called, and I quote, the great equalizer. Education will always be locally driven in this country. Curriculum and other policies are best left to the states and to local leaders. No one disputes that. But the role of the Department of Education is crucial in securing the opportunities and the rights of every student in America. Instead of shoring up our investments in American students, President Trump plans to follow the Project 2025 playbook and turn public education over to the highest bidders and to the wealthiest families. Families and communities across the country are reeling from multiple crises in classrooms, skyrocketing costs for childcare, pre-K, post-secondary education, learning loss, achievement gaps, educator shortages, and epidemics of loneliness and school violence, and they are looking to their elected leaders for solutions. The American people need smaller class sizes, lower costs, but the president's proposed executive order will bring the exact opposite. This executive order is about creating a country where education is not a public good for the benefit of all of society, but a wholly profit-driven enterprise. This is about making sure the quality of education is no longer accessible to middle-class families, but only to the privileged and for the descendants of the wealthy. Before the election, Donald Trump said he plans to cut investments in our children's education, and I quote, cut in half, get much better education in some of the states, end quote. No word on the fate of the children and the families in any of the other states. And to the chairman, who I have great respect for, we've worked together in the past. You know, I don't know if Alabama is counted in, quote, some of the states. I am sure you do know this through the Department of Education, because Alabama annually receives $239 million for the needs of 100,000 students with disabilities, $303 million to ensure there is a teacher in the classroom, 452,000 low-income students, or 63% of Alabama's students, $36 million for career and technical education, workforce development, $50 million to help make college more accessible for low-income and first-generation students and for students with disability. This in addition to the hundreds of millions of dollars that go to Alabama students through Pell Grants and other education programs. I don't know the details of the Alabama state education funding, but I doubt if Alabama or Connecticut or any other state is ready to absorb the costs that are covered by the Department of Education. Rather, the elimination of any of these programs will inevitably lead to more students being taught by fewer teachers, fewer opportunities for disadvantaged students, lower achievement, lower economic mobility, lower prosperity for the majority of Americans who are not already well off and well connected. Less than 2 weeks ago, I visited a Title I school in Woodbridge, Connecticut, Amity Regional High School. The students were in the middle of showing me their projects when President Trump illegally froze federal funding for their technology and for teachers' pay. Thankfully, thanks for Democrats' forceful objections, multiple interventions from the federal courts, that freeze was temporarily lifted, but this was just the beginning of a full-scale assault on public education. Meanwhile, Elon Musk, in his illegal campaign to take over federal agencies created by Congress, has already infiltrated the Department of Education, where he has reportedly accessed personal and sensitive financial information, including for grantees. So while we must continue to work towards full-year appropriations bills that can pass the Congress, we cannot allow this invasion and destruction of our government by heavily conflicted billionaires to continue. Government of the people, by the people, for the people cannot be replaced by government of billionaires, by billionaires, and for billionaires. The world cannot afford the American experiment in self-government and our separation of powers across 3 branches of government to fail. I implore my colleagues to fight to retain Congress's authority over spending. the Appropriations Authority over spending, and over the existence of departments and agencies that we created. If it is the will of the people to shrink or eliminate a governmental organization, and that will might be there, then it is the prerogative of the Congress, and only the Congress, to act on it. Education in this country is in crisis. The Department of Education stands ready to assist state and local education agencies recover from learning loss, achievement gaps, educator shortages, to help struggling families afford childcare, pre-K, and post-secondary education. As we will discuss today, community colleges are an irreplaceable source of economic mobility in this country. So we must learn how to best align these institutions with local workforce needs. We must implement and stand up for the programs that serve this need wherever this is a federal role to be engaged. What we cannot do and what we will not do is to retreat from our children's education altogether. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. DeLauro. And now I'd like to turn to our witnesses. You'll each have 5 minutes to deliver your opening remarks. I know you submitted written testimony that might be a little bit over 5 minutes, so it will be included. So we'll include that in the record in full. So, Ms. Cooper, we'll begin with you. So I look forward to hearing your testimony, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Adderholt, Ranking Member DeLauro, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the federal role in post-secondary education and the value of different educational pathways beyond the four-year college degree. My name is Preston Cooper, and I'm a senior fellow focusing on the economics of higher education at the American Enterprise Institute, a nonprofit, nonpartisan public policy research organization based here in Washington, D.C. For decades, students and policymakers alike have viewed the four-year college degree as a golden ticket to the middle class. But in recent years, that consensus that higher education is a surefire investment has fallen apart. Among other factors, high rates of student loan non-payment and default have driven a collapse in public confidence in the value of college. As a result, college enrollment has fallen 12% since its peak in 2010. To be sure, a four-year college degree is still a great investment on average, but an average is just that. A large minority of students who pursue four-year degrees wind up no better off financially than if they had not attended college in the first place. Moreover, a four-year degree is not the only viable pathway to a comfortable middle-class life. Other promising options exist within the post-secondary education ecosystem, but do not always receive the recognition they are due. The payoff of a four-year college degree varies widely by field of study. Different college majors unlock different sorts of job opportunities, and some skill sets are more in demand than others. Majors such as engineering, computer science, nursing, and economics tend to deliver very large financial benefits, but that isn't always the case for other majors such as fine arts and English literature. But a student's college major is not the only factor that matters. Tuition prices can make a difference. When college is more expensive, it's less likely that your degree will pay off, all else being equal. A degree which pays off when tuition is $5,000 a year may not be a good bet at $20,000 a year. Graduation rates can also make or break the financial value of college. Most of the economic value of a degree is contingent on actually finishing the degree. Students must graduate to reap most of the benefits. But nationwide, only 62% of students who start college complete a degree within 6 years, and 124 federally funded institutions have a completion rate below 10%. The uneven value of four-year college degrees has led many prospective students to consider community college or vocational school as alternatives. Many certificates in the technical trades have higher expected payoffs than the median bachelor's degree. Moreover, promising options exist outside the federal student aid system entirely. For instance, Virginia's Fast Forward initiative offers short-term training for industry-recognized credentials in high-demand occupations. America's small but growing apprenticeship system also offers excellent opportunities for on-the-job learning, with numerous studies showing high starting salaries and sustained earnings growth for apprentices. Unfortunately, federal government subsidies create a tilted playing field between traditional higher education programs and other pathways. While students can use Pell Grants and student loans for traditional four-year degree programs and many sub-baccalaureate credentials, statutory restrictions mean other types of programs are ineligible for funding. For instance, minimum clock hour requirements mean that short-term workforce education programs such as Virginia Fast Forward largely cannot qualify for Pell Grant funding. A requirement that funds only be used for courses that are part of a degree or certificate program means that some individuals completing apprenticeships or other on-the-job training cannot use their aid to pay for complementary classroom instructions. Finally, new and potentially innovative providers of higher education often cannot get access to federal funding streams thanks to accreditation requirements designed to benefit incumbent institutions. The federal government should not put its thumb on the scales in favor of the traditional four-year college degree or any other educational model. However, policymakers should also strive to ensure that all federally funded programs, traditional or non-traditional, maintain high standards with respect to student outcomes. No single post-secondary pathway will be the right answer for every student. Policymakers should therefore aim to elevate high-quality pathways across the board. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Good morning, Chairman Adderholt, Ranking Member DeLauro, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. As you know, I'm Dr. Vicki Karlowicz, and I've had the privilege of serving as president of Wallace State Community College for the last 21 years. Thank you for inviting me to appear before you today to speak on the topic of career preparation and to represent Wallace State Community College. We are a nationally recognized community college serving more than 8,000 students each semester. Located in the heart of North Alabama, more than half of the state's population resides within a 60-mile radius of our campus. Yet we are a uniquely rural-serving institution. Our region is a mix of manufacturing and agriculture, including automakers like Mercedes and Honda and Hyundai and Mazda Toyota. At the same time, the college's home county is top in the state for poultry and cattle production, and second for overall agricultural production. My remarks today are intended to answer the questions of how does Wallace State help students to maximize their earnings and employment potential, to maximize their return on investment, and how have we maximized student outcomes? Simply stated, we focus on powerful partnerships and purposeful pathways to good jobs that pay a living wage. Many of our students are non-traditional. They're single mothers, working parents, older adults, displaced workers, first generation, and low income. They need good jobs that pay the minimum earnings required for economic self-sufficiency, jobs that result in social and economic mobility. Those jobs don't always require a bachelor's degree, but they do require some post-secondary education beyond the high school diploma. And they are often middle skills jobs. Middle skills workers are vital to the American economy and to their local communities. Our pathways work was advanced through the design and implementation of guided pathways, which included curricular alignment designed to accelerate students to completion of credentials having workforce value in the middle skills jobs as well as toward university transfer. The curricular alignment is closely tied to labor market outcomes and to our partners in industry and education. An important strategy has been the creation of stacked credentials because so many community college students do stop out before earning a college degree. Latticed credentials enable those students to leave the college with marketable credentials at multiple points in their progress. An example of this practice is a student earning a practical nursing credential on the pathway to the associate degree for registered nursing. Should that student be forced to stop out due to life circumstances, he or she could still work as an LPN and make a living wage. Wallace State is very intentional about career preparedness along the lifelong continuum from cradle to grave. Essential to our success are the partnerships that we cultivate with business and industry, K-12, universities, healthcare, nonprofits, and government. One of the most valuable strategies the college has employed to enable students to maximize their employment and earnings potential is work-based learning. Earn and learn opportunities such as apprenticeships and internships connect students to high-value middle skills jobs along the pathway to completion. maximizing their earnings potential at graduation through higher starting salaries. One of the college's high-impact practices is our NCAL FAME program. Wallace State partnered with industry leaders to develop the North Central Alabama Federation for Advanced Manufacturing Education and to create a curriculum that is aligned to employers' requirements, adopting the Advanced Manufacturing Technician, or AMT model, that was developed by Toyota in an earn and learn format. And just as an aside, there was a competition in Montgomery yesterday, the Alabama FAME Summit, and our student won the gold, so we're proud of that. Because of our intentionality and focus on creating purposeful pathways and powerful partnerships, our student success rate is more than 80%. This is just a brief snapshot of Wallace State's multi-layered approach to preparing our students for careers with living wages. Again, I'm very honored to be here with you today. My team and I will be back in Washington, by the way, in April to find out if we have won the $1 million Aspen Prize awarded to the best community college in the nation. We are currently a top 10 finalist. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity, and I look forward to this discussion.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. McCarthy, we'll go with you next.
Good morning, Chairman Adderholt, Ranking Member DeLauro, and esteemed members of the committee. It is an honor to be with you this morning. Thank you for this opportunity. I lead the Center on Education and Labor at New America. We are committed to expanding access to the middle class and family-sustaining careers. We have a large body of work on community colleges, apprenticeships, youth pathways, and career technical education. And this topic is very dear to my heart. I have been working to build more pathways to the middle class for well over a decade. First as a member of the Career Service at the U.S. Department of Labor, and then at the Department of Education, and now at New America. Over that time, I have learned three big lessons on the opportunities and challenges to expanding access to the middle class. The first is that the desire to expand access to good jobs and family-sustaining careers and to strengthen our middle class is broadly shared. The understanding that community colleges and high-quality career and technical education will be essential for making that happen is also widely understood and shared. It's one of the best things about working in this space. You can pretty much go anywhere, red states, blue states, big cities, small towns, and you will find that most people want to see more opportunities for young people that aren't just traditional college. In fact, I imagine the majority of everyone's constituents in this room would like to see more pathways into the middle class. In this time of such intense polarization, it's a comfort to know that we still that there are important things that we still agree on. The second lesson is that in all my time working in this space, I have never heard anyone complain that our community colleges are just getting too much money. I've never visited a college that had a surplus of resources or that could provide all of the support services that they know their students need. I have certainly heard complaints about community colleges, in particular about their completion rates being too low, but these have just as often come from college leaders themselves, eager to find ways to improve those outcomes and curious about the latest research. And the third lesson is that when community colleges do have additional funding, whether it's targeted grants like the Strengthening Community College Training Grant Program or the HERF funds during the pandemic, they put them to good use. Colleges use these resources to develop programs in new and emerging sectors in fields like artificial intelligence or electric vehicles. They build new industry partnerships and work-based learning opportunities, create and staff the advising and career services that their students need, and build high-quality data systems that help them understand who their students are and how they're doing every step of the way. So as we enter the budgeting season, I'm finding myself more than a bit bewildered and alarmed by the attacks on education taking place right now. First is the decision to halt educational research supported through the Institute for Educational Sciences, IES. In my written testimony, I provide examples of evidence-based practices for helping students complete high-quality career preparation programs at community colleges. We know these strategies are successful because they've been extensively studied, subject to rigorous research and evaluation, much of it funded through IES. These studies have been a critical source of learning for education leaders for decades. It's essential that this research continue. Second is the insistence that we cut education spending. In my written testimony, I note that current funding for career and technical education is less than what it was in 2001. And I call for substantial increase to investments in community colleges, including tripling the investment in the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Program to $4 billion a year. Even at this level, we would still be far behind what other advanced economies invest in their vocational education systems, and well within our means. Most importantly, it is critical to meeting the desire of the majority of Americans for building more pathways to the middle class that do not pass through traditional higher education, which again, I believe all of your constituents share. Instead of increasing funding for something that most Americans support, we are hearing that we cannot afford to invest more in CTE and community colleges, or in Head Start, or job training, or WIOA, or Pell Grants, because we need to extend tax cuts to billionaires, literally putting the financial demands of billionaires and multimillionaires over young people who need quality career education, over middle-class families that need affordable pathways to good jobs. Third are the reckless threats to dismantle the Department of Education, an extreme position that is well outside the mainstream public opinion. I'm not a constitutional lawyer, so I won't get into the legality of these actions, which seem highly questionable, but I can say with confidence that dismantling the Department of Education and relocating its various programs to other agencies will not be good for students. In the case of CTE, Career and Technical Education and Community Colleges, the tremendous improvements in both over the last 2 decades have come primarily through strengthening their connections to our K-12 and higher education systems, making it easier for students to move from high school to community college to higher education or directly into a career without losing credit and without losing momentum. Moving the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education out of the Department of Education would be a step backward. It would be a step toward the time when vocational education was disconnected from other systems and a dead end for many students. As a last request, I implore Congress to exercise its responsibilities under Article 1 of the Constitution and rein these destructive and frankly anti-American attacks on the middle class by the executive branch since January 20th. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today and for your kind consideration of these recommendations.
Thank you, Dr. McCarthy. Mr. Parker.
Good morning, Chairman Adderholt, Ranking Member DeLauro, and esteemed members of the subcommittee. I'm Dennis Dow Parker. Through our T10 program. We maintain a long partnership with the University of Kentucky that provides technology degrees in lean systems and computer engineering. Today, however, I will focus on a leading example of engagement between industry and education developed by Toyota called FAME, the Federation for Advanced Manufacturing Education. FAME is a career pathway program whose goal is to produce globally competitive entry-level technicians. FAME is revolutionary. First, it reinvented the 2-year educational experience at the community college level by reimagining the manufacturing curriculum, the education delivery model, and the classroom setting. Second, it incorporates a deep engagement with primary and secondary education and a seamless set of continuing pathways leading to bachelor's and master's degrees. Third, FAME focuses on developing the whole person who can be highly successful. In addition to the technical education, a robust soft skills component and a powerful productivity component are incorporated into a 24-month curriculum with students alternating days at work and days at school. Fourth, FAME is developed and driven by employers. This overarching principle dictates many aspects of the program. Employers choose the college most suited to program success, help develop and approve coursework, visit high schools, recruit students, interview applicants, and structure on-the-job experience at the companies. Developed by Toyota in 2010 at a school near our Kentucky plant, today FAME stretches from North Carolina to Michigan, from North Carolina to California, from Michigan to Florida, in 16 states with over 45 community colleges and over 450 participating company partners. States like Alabama, Indiana, Kentucky, and Texas leverage the programs at multiple locations within the state. At the national level, FAME USA is led by the Manufacturing Institute, the workforce partner of the National Association of Manufacturers. FAME in Alabama demonstrates the program's effectiveness at developing a highly skilled workforce. With the $12 million federal grant awarded in 2019, Alabama expanded its FAME chapters from 1 to 11. The program's success caused participation to surge, now involving nearly half of the state's colleges and 125-plus employers. Alabama became the first state to pioneer a second FAME occupational pathway, broadening the model's relevance. With a third pathway under consideration in California, FAME underscores its adaptability and success in addressing workforce shortages across multiple sectors. Strategic federal funding plays a crucial role in scaling workforce training programs like FAME. By allowing employer collaboratives to direct funds towards specific training needs, these resources help institutions to build facilities, acquire equipment, and hire instructors, critical elements for launching and sustaining high-quality programs. Ongoing access to funding for capital expansion ensures that these programs can meet increasing demand without financial bottlenecks. Perkins Career and Technical Education funding used for equipment purchases in educational settings remains an essential resource. And additional federal support through targeted workforce grants would further accelerate the ability to produce the highly skilled professionals needed to secure America's manufacturing dominance. A strong manufacturing industry is fundamental to America's economic prosperity. I hope I've demonstrated how U.S. manufacturing and education partnerships can generate a world-class workforce pipeline. This committee is uniquely situated to help sustain America's global manufacturing competitiveness to keep our economy thriving. The funding your committee authorizes can reinvigorate the foundation required to ensure America's long-term global manufacturing leadership. I very much appreciate the opportunity to testify before the subcommittee, and I would be happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, and let me begin with you. I know Toyota has developed two world-class talent development programs, AMT, which you described, and also is T10?
Yes.
I'm going to say that right, which supports automotive dealers across the country. Despite this verified success in creating training programs, Toyota relies on a decentralized approach to recruitment and to talent development. Can you talk a little bit about the advantages of this decentralized approach that Toyota uses?
Let me clarify, what do you mean by the decentralized approach?
Well, just as opposed to actually one centralized location where you use it. You've talked about different parts of the country and how each, from California all the way over to Florida to Alabama, and just a little bit about how that has been more effective than from top to bottom. You've allowed the decentralization of that program.
Thank you. That clarification helps. We feel this principle expands across this program and others in many ways. We feel that the best decisions for employment and gaining the best fit for workers, which feeds everyone's success, are best determined by local plants working with their local communities. Now, in a program like FAME, that's the one we referenced that had the scale that you mentioned. In a program like FAME, we have guidelines that all of those locations would observe, but then in applying those guidelines locally, they would make those local decisions, and they can best staff our plants with that local control.
Gotcha. All right. Dr. Karlowicz, many of us have heard from employers, I would say pretty much everybody probably on this subcommittee, about need to find workers, especially in a competitive labor market. And there's a need to ensure that what students are learning aligns with the job demands. And can you tell us a little bit more about Wallace State and how it has aligned its programs and majors to match what employers are actually looking for, especially for these in-demand fields? And second of all, talk about maybe about students, are they staying in the Coleman, Hanceville, Coleman County area or the broader region after they graduate? Because they are connected to those good jobs that are in the market. So could you talk about those two things, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to answer that question. The first, I would say yes, that our students, because we are the community's college, that's what community colleges are. Our students do predominantly stay in our region, and we want them to, simply because we need that talent pipeline for our employers in our region. Our programs are very closely tied to labor market outcomes. We regularly assess the new and emerging careers. We assess our top 10, top 20 occupations, what the labor market outcomes are for those, what the salaries are, and we align our programs to that because ultimately we want our students to have those good jobs that pay the living wage. I'm sorry, could you repeat that question,
Oh, yeah.
middle part of the question?
Tell us a little bit more about how your programs are aligned to match what employers are actually looking for.
Yes, we regularly assess that labor market data and make
Right.
sure that we are teaching the skills that our students need to be successful in the workforce, and we include the earn and learn opportunities in there to the extent that we can. It makes such a difference for a student who comes from poverty to have an opportunity to make a living wage while they're working toward their associate degree. So those apprenticeships and internships, we created a nursing apprenticeship, the first one in the state, which is a registered nursing apprenticeship, which allows students to work 2 to 4 days in a hospital while they're working on their associate degree in nursing. That is a life-changing opportunity for a single mother. And, you know, Alabama has, Mr. Chairman, Alabama has a higher rate of poverty than the United States. We have a lower rate of labor force participation than the United States. And so lifting people out of poverty requires being able to connect them to good-paying jobs, and we do that through the earn and learn opportunities for the most part.
And as you say, just clarify that about your students are staying in the Coleman area.
Yes.
Because of the job demand and also just because they want to stay closer to home as opposed to traveling off, so.
They do contribute to some of the out-migration numbers that our Economic Development Agency would report to you, because if we get a student through the FAME Advanced Manufacturing Technician, the AMT program that we talked about, if a student finishes that program, they're going to go to work at Mazda Toyota or Honda, which is a commute. It's a 45-minute or an hour commute. And so they out-migrate to jobs that pay more, and then they come back and spend their money in the Coleman community, which is what we want them to do. But ultimately, 96% of our student body in the community colleges in the state of Alabama are Alabamians, where up to half of the universities are educating students from outside of the state, and they're more likely to return to their home communities. But ours are a part of our community because it's their home community, so yes, they stay with us.
Well, 45-minute commute around here is not much at all.
That's
so,
easy, isn't it?
Yeah, so
Yes,
that's
sir.
understandable. Okay, Mr. Laurel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for talking about how, in fact, the federal resources, the grants, et cetera, are giving you viable opportunities to help give young people a pathway to a future. And so we're grateful for that, to understand the value of what we do, and it's and its success rate. So I thank to both of my colleagues who, or the guests who just spoke, but let me just, because several of the witnesses testified how WIOA, the training programs are vital. They're vital sources of funding for workforce training developed and implemented at community colleges. And despite the needs for these funds, it's alarming. The bill that the majority has come up with, 2025 funding bill, eliminates the WIOA Youth Job Training Program, denied training, employment services for 134,000 youth who face barriers to finding a good paying job. The cuts to WIOA adult job training would deny job training and employment services for 250,000 adults facing the same barriers. Dr. McCarthy, explain how community colleges access and the utilization of WIOA funding helps job seekers. How would the eliminations, cuts to the program proposed here impact community college students who are benefiting from the grants?
Thank you, Ranking Member DeLauro, for the question. And I will just say, I mean, eliminating the WIOA youth program would just be catastrophic for many communities, where for many young people who are neither in school or working, it is our public workforce system that provides that point of connection either to school or to work, or best of all, to both. So it's hard to even imagine how we could think that this was a good idea. It's deeply self-defeating. At the Center on Education and Labor at New America, we have done quite a bit of research on how community colleges and the public workforce system work together. And again, you know, these are things that could be improved. But community colleges, and when community colleges and their local workforce development boards are able to work together, they're able to really capitalize on one another's strengths. We've seen some excellent examples, for example, in the state of New Jersey, where and Rowan College of South Jersey, the Workforce Board and the community college share staff, and the American Job Center is located on campus. This allows them to work together and to leverage the workforce system's resources for building sectoral partnerships and engaging employers with the community college's deep expertise on how to serve students, particularly students who might need extra supports or developmental education. In Morris County, New Jersey, the workforce system and Morris County College of New Jersey are collaborating on the creation of a registered apprenticeship program that also leads to an associate degree, perhaps similar to what you have at Wallace State. The workforce system is a little bit more closely connected to our registered apprenticeship system generally than community colleges, so they can be an important intermediary. And in the state of Kentucky, too, we've seen fantastic partnerships between workforce boards and community colleges. Just a very quick one, in Jefferson Community and Technical College has a project-based partnership with their local workforce board that moves students away from the really short individual training accounts that are just sort of quick 8 weeks of training and into longer-term programs that lead to those good family-sustaining jobs. This is not the time to be cutting our workforce development system. Our employers face worker shortages. People are having a hard time finding their way to those good jobs. That's what the system is for. And when it works together with community colleges, they amplify each other.
Thank you. Let me just ask Dr. Parker here, because I read your testimony carefully. Page 4 of your testimony says, strategic federal funding, resources allocated through the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Program, plays a crucial role in scaling workforce training programs like FAME. And it sounds good. Advanced manufacturing is where we should be going. And that's a workforce development board, and it's allowing employer collaboratives to direct funds towards specific training needs. Resources help institutions acquire equipment, build facilities, hire instructors, critical elements for launching and sustaining high quality programs. So what a collaboration that you have going here. If you eliminate WIOA for job seekers nationwide, what does that mean for this collaboration of community colleges and the goals that you are trying to meet with? And I compliment Toyota. I compliment businesses these days in that function. It's now for the first time that we see business and community colleges, et cetera, uniting to say what is the best course for a person to take to help them realize their goals.
So certainly at our FAME chapters that we have in the FAME program, funding, for example, that comes through or via WIOA. That's very helpful, as I had testified. Looking at the larger ramifications of what that loss of funding or that change of funding might be would be difficult to estimate for any given chapter because, again, it goes with that principle I mentioned earlier. Each chapter works out their unique chemistry that they have. Certainly, federal funding is very important to what we do. It helps us to accomplish outcomes. We would be paying a lot of interested attention to how that continues to be orchestrated. I'm not sure I could give an answer that would be exactly true or exactly representative for every chapter's situation.
Thank you. I think we've done well at the federal level and being able to appropriate dollars that allow youngsters and single parents, as you've talked about, probably mostly women, that can climb that ladder to success. Thank you very, very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cooper, you in your testimony talked about Virginia Fast Forward, a program I believe that you're familiar with that gives a credential for workforce development in high-demand areas. You also mentioned the Pell program. The Pell grant really doesn't have the flexibility to be used in a program like that. Is that accurate?
That's right. So the Pell Grant program has a minimum of 15 weeks that the programs that needs to be funded need to be at least 15 weeks in duration and at least 600 clock hours. But a number of the short-term training programs that lead to industry-recognized credentials that Virginia Fast Forward supports are not eligible for Pell Grant funding because of that restriction.
So if you were going to design a new Pell criteria that would give that kind of flexibility, how would you design that?
I would certainly lower the minimum number of weeks, the minimum number of clock hours. We could probably have a debate about the exact number. The Bipartisan Workforce Pell Act says 150 clock hours, 8 weeks, which would allow some Virginia Fast Forward programs, but not all. But I would also argue that that would have to be paired with some sort of outcomes benchmark to ensure that we're funding high-quality programs.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Karlowicz, what are your thoughts on this topic? Because I hear quite often from people that we'd like to have more flexibility in the Pell Grant, and I know we've made it year-round, gave a little bit more flexibility, but do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, as a matter of fact. The year-round Pell has been a lifeline for most of our students. More than half of our students receive need-based financial aid. Because, as I said earlier, we serve rural Alabama, and many parts of rural Alabama are in poverty. So one thought in particular, an example that I could suggest is like a commercial truck driving program. So a living wage in the state of Alabama in our region is considered about $40,000 a year. So we train commercial truck driving classes on a non-credit basis, but we call it workforce credit because every credit counts. And it's about a 4 to 5 week program. So there's no way to have Pell provide for paying for that tuition, so students have to figure out how to come up with it themselves. And that's very difficult for some of them to do. But how life-changing would that be to fund a program that has a more narrow number of hours, a more narrow number of weeks, to be able to put a student or a graduate in a living wage job. The average earnings for a commercial truck driver at entry level in the state of Alabama exceeds $60,000. That's life-changing for a single parent. So Wallace State started a program that seeks to train persons who are wheelchair-bound or use a wheelchair. One of our most recent students came to us from the state of Colorado. He learned about our program. He was a veteran. He was hurt, paralyzed, and he came to us to re-enter the commercial truck driving world. We trained him, and on the day that he graduated, he had a job offer. And so that's life-changing. So short-term programs of a certain number of weeks and with certain kinds of outcomes, I very much support that. Very much support that, because it's not in a student's best interest to take a truck driving program and make it a 15-week program. And I have seen that happen simply so that a student could be eligible for federal Pell Grant.
And if I could follow up with you, you mentioned you're always assessing kind of what the workforce needs are. What tools do you use to do those assessments?
We have national and local labor market data, so we study all of the different regions in the state of Alabama, the workforce regions, and we have very specific labor market data about that. So we look at professions that are contracting, professions that are growing, the high-wage, high-demand professions, and we make sure that our programs are aligned with that, but not only the programmatic alignment, but also the curricular alignment, so that we are teaching the skills that employers need most.
And then, Mr. Parker, I just wanted to follow up with you on, from an employer standpoint and the collaboration that you have with respect to the Pell Grant. Are you finding that greater flexibility would create more options for you, or is that not really a?
It would absolutely create additional options. In my testimony, I noted that there are additional occupational pathways being developed with FAME, and I'm just using FAME as an example. You know, there's many valuable programs out there these principles would apply to. Some of those occupational pathways would take significantly less time to train and for the preparation completion to be attained. And when we reach those and begin developing those, having more flexibility in those grants and who's eligible would certainly be very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to adopt the remarks that Ms. DeLauro made in the opening comments that she made. I think all of us on this committee, I presume, are supporters of community college, its objectives, and its role that it plays in ensuring that we have skills training in America if we're going to be competitive worldwide. I've been pressing an agenda since 2010 when I was majority leader called Make It in America, which simply means both making sure we make things in America, including services, but also that we succeed in America. You make it. The three major components of that program that I set forth were education and training, infrastructure, and entrepreneurship, making sure people know how to go into a small business that they can then grow into a large business and be successful in America. At the same time, we're having a hearing on things I think that most of us support. What we're not having a hearing on is the undermining of the separation of powers, the checks and balances, and the ability of Congress to set policy and have that policy carried out. We essentially seem to be governing by executive order, both involving legislative and executive responsibilities. Personally, Mr. Chairman, I think we ought to have hearings on that. Frankly, for the last 70 years, maybe longer, the authority of the Congress of the United States over those years has been diminishing and accreting to the executive greater and greater power under both Democrats, Franklin Roosevelt, on forward. I think that's a challenge for our country. And I think what is happening today demands, frankly, Mr. Chairman, that we have hearings on the usurpation unconstitutionally and illegally of the powers of the Congress of the United States, which, of course, under Article 1 are the policymakers. And the policy is supposed to be carried out by the President of the United States. Now, having said that, I'm a big supporter of community colleges. As a matter of fact, the community college in Prince George's County, which abuts the District of Columbia, was started in the same high school that I graduated from at night in 1957. I was elected to the state senate in 1966 and participated in the formation of the community college system in the late 1960s, and am a very strong supporter. And in fact, I have 2 community colleges in my district that have over 40,000 students. I don't, Ms. Cowlix, Doctor, how many students do you have? About 8,000. So substantial size. Yeah, substantial size. And they provide a critical service. Mr. Cooper, let me ask you a question. Yes or no, but you can expand on it. Do you believe the federal government has a role in assuring that these community colleges, which have been created all over the country, do in fact lead to us having more a competitive stature because we are training people for the jobs that are needed to be done in a country like America to be competitive?
Yes, I believe that, and I also believe that we see students actually voting with their feet going to community colleges that are providing direct pathways into the labor force. Community colleges with a vocational orientation saw a 14% increase in student enrollment just in the last year.
Thank you very much. I share that view. And I want to ask Dr. McCarthy, Doctor, and perhaps Dr. Cowlix, you as well. Matter of fact, is it Dr. Parker?
It's Mr. Parker,
Oh,
but I appreciate the promotion.
yeah. I'm prepared to follow the appellation of doctor. But in any event, all 3 of you mentioned, how can we better coordinate? And you're all coordinating because the workforce is changing so rapidly in America, and indeed throughout the world, to make sure that we are keeping up with offerings of that are relevant, not today, but 5, 10, 15 years from today.
Yeah, that is one of the biggest challenges I think that our community colleges and just local economic development agencies face. And I think the best way to do that is, you know, when institutions have resources to be able to do the kind of labor market research needed, they're able to get out in front of those. We are supporting a group of community colleges that are part of the National Science Foundation's Regional Innovation Engines. These are investments in regional economies around the country that are building next-generation technologies, and community colleges are part of those consortia, along with their university partners and other economic development agencies. So we need to fund partnerships, and we need to give community colleges the resources they need to be able to look around the corner.
Doctor?
Yes, sir, thank you. I would say continue doing what Congress has been doing over the years. I can give you examples of sources of funds that have really transformed the way that we serve students. One of those is, most recently, the work grant, the Workforce Opportunities for Rural Communities. We used those funds and leveraged other funds to begin a diesel by distance program. And we're in North Alabama, as you recall, so our diesel by distance program was developed in an online format with virtual reality simulations and then just-in-time learning, so that students, when they finished their lab portions, then they also had earn and learn opportunities. But when they finished their lab portions of the curriculum, they could schedule time with us on nights or weekends to come and do lab checkoffs. We would not have been able to do that without the funding provided through the work grant. So another example is through the TAC grant. Many of you might remember the TAC grant from many years ago. We started our very first delving into curriculum development with virtual reality and simulations. Simulations have changed the face of nursing education today. Title III. We're a caring campus, and we used our Title III funds the last couple of years to develop that model for being a caring campus and serving the holistic needs of our students. So the things that you have been doing are the things that I would recommend that you continue to do because they work.
I think one of the most important answers to this, or one of the most important solutions, not the only solution, is to more highly engage employers in the process. So looking at the coordination, how we can better cooperate. And so where you have employers leading the activity or leading the program, they are, by the very nature of what they're doing, they're involved, they're engaged, and they're helping to make things happen. And when you look at where the churn of the economy occurs, it occurs in the workplace. With that employer engagement, you will have better communication between them and education. That in turn will produce stronger programs, better prepared students, and that will complete a cycle into the place of work where they will produce better work with stronger outcomes. Good for the American economy, good for the local economy. The key, I think, is how do you get that employer engagement to become the glue for those activities?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It truly warms my heart when our educational institutions and private sectors partner together to ensure students are ready and fully prepared to meet a critical workforce need. Public-private partnerships are the answer, and I'm so excited about today's hearing. And I want to brag a little bit about my own district. One example happening in my own backyard is Louisiana Delta Community College came together with the Northeast Louisiana Power Cooperative and Workforce Development Board 83 to create an intensive 16-week program that fills a critical need for line workers in the energy sector. And you can imagine in Louisiana, we desperately need those. And this high-quality short-term workforce training program graduated their first cohort of 10 students last fall. A new cohort of 6 students just completed their training last week, and a third cohort is expected to begin in March. The LDCC program benefits from direct funding from our committee, supplemental state funding, and additional resources for equipment and scholarships through several electric and power companies, including Entergy, Northeast Louisiana Power Cooperative, and Chain Electric. There are 4 total programs like this one across the state of Louisiana. I am a strong advocate for career and technical education funding and a variety of other workforce programs. And hopefully, one day, we can all come together and, in agreement, expand Pell Grants for these types of short-term workforce programs that we've already discussed. My first question is to you, Dr. Karlowicz. You come from a rural area of Alabama, similar to mine. I imagine your community college, as well as students, face different challenges than institutions located in urban areas. As I visited these schools throughout my district, I've heard they often do not have the financial resources to hire professional grant writers to help them through a complex and burdensome grant process. Is this something that your institution is facing, and how can we be better partners in helping you identify grants?
Thank you, Congresswoman Letlow. My institution particularly is not facing a crisis with regard to grant writers. We've been very successful in the grant space over the years. But I do know other institutions in the state of Alabama are, because they have finite resources and they just don't have the funds to be able to staff that position. We've tried to address that in the state of Alabama through our system office by sharing grant writers that are employed at the system level to help them reach into the grant space. And so to the extent that you could help, that would be useful.
Yeah.
Very much so.
It's my concern that the money is not reaching the rural communities as it's intended. I was encouraged to hear that you are using some of the programs, especially the Department of Labor's Workforce Opportunity for rural communities and other rural-focused priority areas with grants. Do you feel like these programs help level the playing field to make sure that that money is getting to rural areas as opposed to urban?
Absolutely. We serve a 4-county area, and we have 8,400 students in fall semester. The population of the town, our hometown, is 3,300. We serve another county, Winston County. Chairman Adderholt knows it well. There are problems with transportation. There are problems with childcare. We are in the middle of a childcare desert. So if you are a single mother, like the Diesel by Distance program that I mentioned a minute ago, our very first student enrolling in that program, once we developed it, was a single mother from South Alabama who was place-bound. And that grant and our development of the curriculum that would meet her where she was changed her life, because not only did she achieve her dream, if you will, of becoming a diesel technician, but she it led to intergenerational change for her family.
Sure.
And so that's where the greatest impact is made. In rural Winston County, it's about a 55-minute drive to our campus. If a student does not have a car, they certainly can't get to campus.
Right.
So making learning accessible to them makes a lifetime difference to them and to their family.
Sure. Thank you for your response. Looks like I'm running out of time. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the panelists. Unfortunately, and this is not directed to the chairman, but to perhaps what we're doing in Congress right now, there's an incredible congressional tone deafness to the moment that we all are in. I mean, we literally are raking leaves while there's a forest fire behind us and ignoring what's actually all going on. And having a hearing like this today when we have this incredibly slow pace of bills before Congress. Yesterday we voted on a PQ and a rule, not even a bill, a PQ and a rule, because we are so unaware of the surroundings around Congress. We have no continuing resolution after March 14th to fund the government, but we're debating about whether or not someone's at the table or not instead. We just finally got a reconciliation bill this morning, which is already within minutes dead on arrival because one of your members already said that it's not going to happen and you can't give up more than one vote. So that process is for naught. We've got agencies being dismantled by an unelected billionaire and a guy named Big Balls while we're sitting here having a hearing unrelated to everything that's happening around us. The chairman of the Appropriations Committee, who I have great respect for, was asked by a reporter about the freeze that's being put on by federal agencies, again, by this unelected billionaire and a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds. And he responded, "I'm not a lawyer, I can't pontificate what's legal, but I suspect what's happening is what most Republicans would be supportive of. Appropriations is not a law, it's the directive of Congress." The Constitution, Mr. Chairman, the Constitution actually says no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in the consequence of appropriations made by law. We refer to the last year's minibus agreement as Public Law 11842. So we're ignoring reality on a regular basis here. And I apologize to the panelists who came here because you're all talking about very important things. But we're ignoring the complete reality of everything going on around us. In addition to this process and abdicating what appropriations is even about, we've got a constitutional crisis on the horizon. We've got court orders telling us that we have to allow USAID employees back, and we're still turning them back at the door, and we have no resolution to that. This is what our everyday existence is in Congress, and we're having a conversation about counting the pebbles on a beach while there's a tsunami on the horizon. So no offense to the panelists, because you are here on important issues. I'm an employer. I've been for 37 years. But man, talk about tone deaf, right? I mean, we are ignoring the most important things impacting Congress and having hearings like this while we're basically saying the Appropriations Committee doesn't matter because there's an unelected billionaire that's going to do our job for us. And by the way, an unelected billionaire who has federal contracts, over $20 billion of federal contracts, which is nothing but leading to corruption. As members of Congress, we can't have a federal contract. As a federal employee, you can't have one related to anything you do. And this guy's right now sitting on $3 billion plus undisclosed contracts while he's turning on and off the levers of funding for federal agencies. And we're talking about whether or not we've got enough people for the workforce and whether higher education is affordable enough. So please give me a little patience with this, if you will, but I want to make sure I'm utilizing your time. Can you answer this? Will any of these things help lead us to lowering the cost of higher education, or for that matter, eggs or milk, or help us get more people in the workforce? So far, here's what's happened. We've cut funding to poor people across the world. We've got someone stealing our data, who's an unelected bureaucrat right now. We've changed the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. We've talked about annexing Greenland. We're going to take over Gaza. We've banned girls from playing in sports, and we blamed DEI for a plane crash at DCA. So if you can just really quickly, any of those things going to lower the cost of higher education or find more workers? Mr. Parker? Thank you. Next, Ms. McCarthy. Okay. Doctor, I cannot pronounce your name. I apologize.
It's Karlowicz, and
Karlowicz.
I couldn't speak to that, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cooper?
I'm afraid that's also outside my area of expertise.
All right, well, at least I got to use your time. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in today's important discussion on career readiness and the role of community colleges and technical institutions and private sector training programs in preparing Americans for the workforce. For too long, the conversation around education has focused almost exclusively on the idea that a four-year college degree is the only path to success. But the reality is that for many Americans, particularly those looking to enter high-demand fields, technical and vocational education provide a faster, more affordable, and more effective pathway to a well-paying job. Community colleges and trade schools offer critical training in fields where skilled workers are in high demand and where wages often exceed those of many traditional bachelor degree holders. These programs not only provide students with valuable skills, but also strengthen our economy by addressing the growing skilled labor shortage. Federal spending in higher education has ballooned in recent decades, yet we continue to see disappointing outcomes in both student preparedness and workforce participation. Rather than throwing more money at a broken system, I believe we should focus on ensuring that existing funds are used effectively, supporting programs with proven outcomes, fostering industry partnerships, and empowering students to choose the educational pathway that best suits their career goals. Additionally, we must recognize the role of private sector training programs in filling workforce gaps. Many businesses are stepping up to provide on-the-job training and certification programs, often at no cost to workers. These industry-driven models offer a market-based solution to workforce shortages without burdening the taxpayers with unnecessary spending. I believe we need an approach that prioritizes career readiness, eliminates wasteful government spending, which I think is one of the things that DOGE is doing, and I applaud them for that, and embraces both community colleges and private sector innovation. America's students deserve educational options that set them up for real success with a well-paying job, not just a piece of paper. So, Mr. Cooper, first question for you. Community colleges and trade schools offer specialized training in industries where skilled workers are desperately needed. In fact, in my own district, I want to call out Lanier Technical College, which boasts a 100% job placement rate for its graduates, 100%. Given the overwhelming success of institutions like Lanier Tech, how do you think that we should better shift the conversation toward making technical and community college education an end goal in itself so we can get our people more expeditiously into the workforce so they can become productive for America?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I 100% agree that a four-year college degree should not be the only pathway, and that community colleges, technical schools, vocational schools are absolutely a very promising pathway for students, not only because they deliver a direct pathway into the labor force, a direct pathway into higher paying jobs, but they also get people into the workforce faster with shorter duration programs. And so I've always said that I don't want to see the federal government putting its thumb on the scales in favor of one option over the other, that we should have, regardless of which pathway students choose, as long as that's a high quality pathway that's going to lead to economic success, we should make the programs that are supporting education, not discriminate between pathways across the board.
All right, well, thank you. Mr. Barker, Toyota and other manufacturers have demonstrated that they can successfully design and implement workforce training programs tailored to industry needs. In fact, Toyota Industries Compressor Parts America has a significant presence in Georgia's 9th District. As you've noted in your testimony, Toyota has created a pipeline for workforce training through the Federation for Advanced Manufacturing Education program, which ensures students gain hands-on experience while simultaneously earning a paycheck. Programs like these show that the private sector is often better equipped than the federal government to provide targeted, effective workforce training. So given the success of employer-driven models like what Toyota is doing, how can we make this stronger and more effective?
I think one of the key things, and which you just noted in your testimony that we've learned, is that when we have, and this comes back to a common theme again, right? When we have very
Yes, I agree.
We know what works in the workplace. We know the skills that give us outcomes, give us business outcomes. When we have that close employer involvement and we work in conjunction with education partners, we bring a wider understanding of the problem. We bring greater expertise into the solution of that problem. We bring a different set of resources, and all together, we can craft those better answers. What I might recommend is that the committee, through your work, and all of us in this common work for the nation, is we look at how can we expand that effect. We're complete believers in the sense that an employer-led activity is what produces the best results in this collaborative environment with all the players.
Well, thank you, and I applaud Toyota for working in that environment and helping make that a reality. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Adderholt. Thank you, Ranking Member DeLauro. And I especially thank you, our witnesses. I'm new to this subcommittee, but you might imagine I'm pretty delighted to be on this subcommittee, especially the focus today on education, educating our young people, our citizens. I say that because for 10 years I taught at a university in Philadelphia. I was a member of an English department. I taught writing and rhetoric and ethics and business writing. It was joyful to see young people claiming their education. But we also saw the stress. We saw the retention problems. We saw the cost problems. But mostly it was a lot of fun. I also am here as somebody who attended community college in my undergrad years. I wanted to make sure I stayed on pace affordably, and so I went to my local community college. Shout out to Montgomery County Community College. It's excellent. And I also have Reading Area Community College in my district. So I know the excellence that community colleges bring to our young people and not so young people, to a diverse population. So it's exciting for me to be here on this subcommittee. But I do want to share Representative Pocan's jarring disconnect between the greater conversation around how we appropriate and what we do around appropriating for our students, young and old, so that they have career pathways. There is a terribly jarring disconnect. I see with such grace the commitment you all have in making sure folks have a chance at the middle class or beyond, have a chance at a technical career, have a chance at a four-year college, have a chance at something even beyond that, so that everybody has a chance. And yet, look where we are right now. In these last 3 weeks, we see, for example, I read with dismay as an educator, the first sentence of the chapter on education in Project 2025. It reads, and it's the first sentence, and I quote, "Federal education policy should be limited, and ultimately, the Federal Department of Education should be eliminated." No hiding it there. That's exactly right. Thank you, Ranking Member. It is page 319, as I bet most of you know, because this is important to you and to your work. Dr. McCarthy, you said something like bewildered by attempts to halt funding. It's deeply self-defeating to cut into funding and connections between private industry and career pathways. So I share Mr. Pocan's jarring disconnect with what this administration, just 3 weeks on the job, is doing to eliminate the Department of Education, among other things. But let me go to something near and dear to my heart, if you don't mind. It's the humanities. I'm somebody who was an English major, and as I told you, I taught all different kinds of writing courses. But yet we have to always recognize the importance of the humanities. Employers in my district express over and over again that they need people who can critically think, who can communicate, who can write well, who can communicate across all different bands of communications. These are emphasized in the humanities programs. So maybe I'll start with you, Dr. McCarthy. What's your thought on that in terms of career readiness? Let's make it match. Let me give her the other. There you go.
Thank you very much for the question, and I share your passion for the humanities. And I do think too often we sort of have this pitting of, career technical and sort of career-oriented education with more academic-oriented education. And the truth is the humanities matter for everyone because it's through the humanities that we make meaning of what we're doing, right? And there's nothing more important than making meaning in your vocation and in your work. So I think when we look at really high-quality career and technical education programs, they often include a lot of background information or context of, like, what is this career? What is it contributing to the broader society? To your other point, all students, including career and technical education students, need those communication skills. They need to be able to write well and to be able to operate in our highly saturated and highly varied communication environment that we're in. So I'm a big fan of the humanities, and there's a big place for the humanities in career and technical education.
Could you speak, I have just limited time, but could you speak to Pell Grants? I had community college folks in, Philadelphia Community College and my other area community colleges in, talking about either flat funding or reducing funding to Pell Grants. What impact does that have?
Again, I can't think of anything more self-defeating for the country than for us to cut our Pell Grant program. This is the most important program to support low-income students to attend college. In reference to some of the earlier remarks, to make sure that every child, no matter what economic circumstances they are born into, have the opportunity to attend college, whether it's community college, whether it's CTE programs, or whether it's higher education. The Pell Grant program has been instrumental since 1965 in doing just that. We would just be injuring ourselves and undercutting our basic social contract, which is that everybody in America should have an opportunity to be their best. And the Pell Grant is a critical building block of that social contract.
I thank you. I thank all of you. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving me the time. I am certain that by cutting the Department of Education, eliminating the Department of Education, it's not just about eliminating dollars and resources. It is about an educated electorate or an uneducated electorate that you can control. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. In my district, District 6, just south of Dallas, a little bit of Tarrant County, we have many outstanding community colleges and trade schools that provide hands-on specialized training directly relevant to the job market. We have 200,000 students between these four institutions: Texas State Technical College, Navarra College, which has a fantastic nursing program, Tarrant County College, and Dallas College, all of whom partner with local businesses. State of Texas is growing at an enormous rate. We have data coming to our state. We have folks moving here from high-tax states. We have an incredible job market because we're a right-to-work state. And we have businesses that partner with our community colleges. And so the debate about Department of Education notwithstanding, I'm so proud that businesses come to the state of Texas. Toyota's got a huge presence in North Texas. Carbon, which used to be Triumph, which used to be Vought, which used to be another aircraft. They're building all the wings for the T-7 trainer that the Air Force and probably the Navy are going to use, and they partner with Texas State Technical College on welding and so many other things. And so I'm just really proud of everything that our community colleges do in our district. I had 5 students from Dallas College in my office just 2 days ago, since they're all up here right now. And they came from a lot of different backgrounds. One student was from Nepal here on a student visa, and he went to a big private school in Dallas. It was extremely expensive, about $200,000 for a 4-year degree. And he said, enough of that. I'm going to start at community college where I can actually afford it, and the return on investment is so much better for my money. We had a single mom whose daughter turned 18, and she said, I'm going to go back and get my degree. I took care of her. Now I'm going to go take care of me. And then we had a couple other students who just, their paths varied, but community college offers so many opportunities for them, and we've just got so many great. So I just wanted to call out folks in District 6 for that. Mr. Parker, before I ask you your question, I see a pin on your lapel. Can you tell me about that? Are you a bubblehead? For those wondering, this is not a pejorative. It is a Navy term for a submariner. Can you tell me which boat you were on? Boats?
And for the subcommittee, yes, I'm a submariner. I was on USS Ray, SSN 653, a fast-attack submarine in the Cold War, and we had great involvement. And I'm a proud Navy veteran and a proud Sea Warrior.
Well,
Captain
Thanks for doing it. Can you tell us any of those stories? You can't, can you? Beat Army. Yeah. See, look, it's bringing us all together. Can you tell us any of those stories? You can't, can you? You're,
I'll tell you the briefest one. In 1986, I was on the second longest run under the Arctic ice cap. We spent 55 days under the ice, a few times over it, and longer in the Arctic. And I will just say that we executed an important defense mission that lives with us today.
I'm sure that's true. You guys are unbelievable. So let's talk about Toyota real quick. In your industry, what are you looking for? What is the biggest need for your industry in the United States today that community colleges can bridge the gap on?
It is absolutely support with workforce acquisition. And so we understand at Toyota that our company is no more and no less than our workforce, our people, and the talent of our people and what they can do. That's all we are.
Say that again.
Our workforce. That is it. Our workforce.
We're not
is
treating our
nothing-
workforce very well.
The community colleges have a crucial role, and I will say, if we narrow this to FAME, which is the program that we primarily use for our technical and soon other workforces, community colleges carry the load for that. That is who we partner with, and they make our company. So workforce acquisition is the biggest need that we have that is transformative for Toyota in the sense of my work with the company and what I do.
Thank you very much. Dr. Cooper, real quick, I got 40 seconds left, so quick answer. Do you think that the return on the investment for the money spent on community colleges and associate degrees and even advanced degrees is greater than that of four-year institutions, specifically private ones?
For the most part, yes. I do want to emphasize that there is a range of outcomes within every degree category, and we should be doing our utmost to support the good pathways over the bad.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I'll just close with this, that not everybody wants to go to a four-year degree. I probably could have used a little seasoning at a community college before I went to the Naval Academy and got my rear end handed to me by advanced classes. But thank you all very much for being here. You provide a substantial service to the United States and our workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Let me just say that I'm feeling a little bit encouraged by this subcommittee meeting. It's one of the few positive things we've been able to discuss and to agree that community colleges are so important to our well-being, our workforce, our lifting up people. And so I therefore look forward to all of my members and friends on this committee voting appropriately when the time comes for the funding. Because as it stands right now, we're in trouble. And so I'm going to ask you all very quickly if this is a up or a down. These are some of the cuts that are being proposed by Elon Musk, maybe President Trump, if Elon allows him. Workforce development, $1.3 billion for WIOA state grants, a decrease of $1.7 billion or 57% below 2024. The bill eliminates the funding for WIOA youth job training, a cut of $948 million below the 2024 level. The bill includes $174 million for adult job training, a cut of $712 million below 2024. $150 million for registered apprenticeships, Madam President, a cut of $135 million. Student aid, $455 million for the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant Program, a cut of $455 million. $650 million for the Federal Work Study Program, a cut of $615 million. Elimination of the Child Care Access Means Parents in School, a cut of $75 million below the 2024 level. That was something that you raised, how important that was to be able to allow women with children or just anybody with children to go to school. These are some of the cuts that are proposed by this out of touch, I don't care about anybody administration. Will those cuts negatively impact those issues and those areas that you suggest are so important to the development of our workforce? Start with you, Mr. Cooper, Doctor, and Mr. And yes or no is a simple answer.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with the proposal you're referencing, so I can't speak to
Well,
it.
are you familiar with the amount of cuts?
I,
that are proposed?
which bill are you referencing? I'm not sure I'm familiar with it.
More than one. I just talked about hundreds of billions of dollars in cuts. The appropriations bills.
5 appropriations
Yes.
bills, which was supposed to deal with before March 14th. Take a look at the cuts on WIOA and federal work study and some of these other areas.
And think about how it impacts what you think is important to this country. So I'll just have a yes or no from the rest of the panel, if you might, because I do have a couple more questions I want to ask very quickly. Does it negatively impact you, Madam President, and your work?
I would need time to study the specifics in order to answer that.
Thank you. Dr. McCarthy? Thank you, Mr. Parker.
It is beyond my expertise and analysis to fully understand.
Thank you very much. On your Toyota program, how many students are enrolled?
I no longer lead that program. Toyota no longer leads that program. The Manufacturing Institute does. My understanding from an informal conversation is right now there are approximately 1,400 active students in Chapter E.
To your knowledge, what percentage are black and brown students and women?
I no longer have that number. The Manufacturing Institute.
Madam President, in your school, what is the percentage of black and brown students in your school?
About 20%,
What percentage of your students in your school are on some sort of federal aid?
more than 50%.
Dr. McCarthy, in your testimony, you pressed on the importance of building pathways to the middle class, career and technical education programs, which prepare students for a variety of jobs. Can you please explain to the committee how the president's absurd efforts to dismantle the Department of Education and gut some of the Department of Labor will have on these programs? Thank you. Thank you for mentioning New Jersey. New Jersey has 21 counties and 21 county colleges, and I have 4 in my district. I even attended one. I love my county colleges. I'm so glad we figured out how we could use them to educate workforces in the future that make this economy the best in the world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our panelists for being with us today. I first want to correct the record. It was mentioned earlier by one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that this president banned girls from playing in sports. That is wholly inaccurate. He banned biological men from playing in women's sports, and that was the accurate decision. I applaud that. I also want to make a comment about the discussion of dismantling the U.S. Department of Education. There are concerns about the effectiveness of the dollars that are being distributed by the U.S. Department of Ed. You have 4,400 employees with a budget of $238 billion. And while I recognize that many of those dollars are going to grant programs, Pell Grants, and others, I think that there's an argument to be made that giving those dollars to the states and letting the states actually determine some of the best uses for those dollars may be a better alternative. Now, focusing on the discussion at hand, I want to say thank you for the focus, Mr. Chairman, on this meeting today. I come from the great state of Oklahoma. We have a phenomenal career tech program. As a matter of fact, Canadian Valley in my district did a public-private partnership with Halliburton to create a wind farm management program that would train young people graduating from high school in 9 months to be a wind farm manager and make a very good livable wage in Oklahoma. So I believe in the programs that are being put forward with these public-private partnerships. Mr. Cooper, if I could start with you. Oklahoma has focused on workforce-ready training in industries like aerospace, energy, and manufacturing. Based on your research, what are the most cost-effective ways to expand technical education programs without burdening students with debt and getting them immediately into the workforce upon graduation?
Well, I would say community and technical colleges, vocational schools have an absolutely critical role here. That we know that at community colleges, the percentage of students who take out student loans is far lower than it is at four-year institutions. And so if we want to get students into the workforce quickly with a minimal amount of debt, I would say shorter-term programs that are often offered by community and technical colleges, which lead directly to a pathway into the labor force, are the best way to do it.
Perfect. To follow up on that, your research focuses on the return on investment in higher education. I have a bill, the Workforce and Education Partnership Act of 2023, that I filed that strengthens employer education partnerships to improve workforce outcomes. In your view, what data-driven policies would be best to ensure these programs lead to high ROI job placement?
Well, I would say that there needs to be some sort of test for outcomes in the programs that are federally funded. We need to make sure that when a program is getting federal Pell Grant or federal student loan funding, that is leading to a good job at the other end of things, that we can't have programs which are federally funded, which have 10, 20% graduation rates, which are leaving students with poverty level wages, which unfortunately there are too many programs that are federally funded that fit that category.
Thank you for that. Moving on to Dr. Karowicz, can you discuss how serving rural community colleges, can you discuss how rural serving community colleges like Wallace State use stackable credentials to improve student completion rates and job placements? And how can federal policy better support the scalable workforce?
Thank you, Congresswoman Bice. As I mentioned in the earlier remarks, we use latticed credentials that build upon each other, that have value in the workforce. I gave you an example of like a practical nursing. We've done that starting at the non-credit level with a nursing support technician to a medication assistant who works in a nursing home to a phlebotomist. All of this is non-credit, right? And so then we move into the credit arena where a student who is pursuing a degree in nursing to become a registered nurse has a stop out at the third semester so that if life happens, as it often does with community college students who have families, who have jobs, who have lives that get in the way, then they can still enter the labor market and make a living wage as a practical nurse and then come back and finish their registered nursing degree when they have the opportunity to do so. We have built that in all of our workforce programs, which is about 60% of our college. With our liberal arts and transfer program, those students don't have a degree that has as much workforce value until it is paired with a baccalaureate degree.
Thank you for that answer. My time has expired, but I just want to say quickly, thank you, sir, for your service. We appreciate you, Mr. Parker, and thank you all for being here today. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. First, thank you to the panel. I actually think this has been a very important hearing in our, what I call a bubble of friendliness, with some exception, but mostly it's been obvious that folks on both sides of the aisle understand the importance of our community colleges. And I have my community college in Palm Beach County, which actually is the home of our president. It's called the State College, but it is phenomenal. It has graduated thousands and thousands of students who go into the community and work in law enforcement and healthcare and auto mechanics and almost every job you can think of, ready to go and raise and take care of their families. And you all, thank you for your passion, and for each of you. I really have been very impressed with what you've said today. What you didn't say is also important. No one said freeze federal funding. No one said cut the education budget. No one said get rid of diversity. No one said eliminate childcare for students. No one said get rid of Pell Grants. And that's why I'm worried. I think some of us are worried because there's some folks in the new administration who are taking, it seems like, a different path. And that's why I think it's so important. We're losing colleagues here today on the other side of the aisle, but this is why it's so important for the members of Congress to speak up and support what you're doing in our community colleges. And I wanted to ask, let me start with you, Dr. McCarthy, because everyone seems to be for investing in our community colleges. But it's not just about how we help an individual, correct? I would like you to talk about how our public investment in education helps the community, helps all of us in terms of prosperity, people paying taxes, going into their communities, being role models, and why it's important not only for the investment, but also to make sure that a diverse population is getting the opportunity.
Was that not working? Okay. Okay. Thank you for that question. As I was saying, community colleges are community institutions, and they have tremendously positive impacts on the communities where they operate. Vibrant communities have vibrant community colleges. Community colleges, too, are, even more than institutions of higher education, which sometimes can be kind of like little islands where they are. Not always, but sometimes they can be. Community colleges have extensive partnerships throughout the community. Those partnerships are the sorts of things that they actually do need funding for the institution to be able to develop. And so it's another reason why it's so important as we're thinking about how we support our community colleges, that yes, things like Pell Grants are very important, but so is direct funding to the institution itself through things like the Strengthening Community College Training Grants or through the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Program. Just an example of just how community colleges enrich their whole communities is in a neighboring community of yours is Broward College and their program Broward Up. This is a program where the then president of Broward Community College, they did a study. They figured out where students in their district area were not coming from and why they weren't, and they went into these poorest districts of this area of Florida. Pardon me for not knowing the name of the county, Broward County, I guess, and established the college there. They didn't wait for the students to come to the college. They brought the college to the students. Right? These kinds of this ability to sort of serve the community is something that is very special to community colleges. It requires resources, and it requires flexible resources for them to be able to do that. I hope that answers your question.
Well, just as a follow-up,
Yeah.
The importance of public funding versus the private institutions, and what is the difference, if anyone knows, between how much it costs these days to go to the public community college versus a private institution?
Oh, I mean, it's absolutely enormous. It's absolutely enormous, and there's no better deal in post-secondary education than community colleges. There's also less risk, frankly. Again, and to Mr. Cooper's point, community college students are less likely to end up with large amounts of debt. They do have pathways. Their credits are more likely to transfer to other institutions. It's just a much better deal for for students. But again, that depends a lot on how well resourced and funded the community college is itself, how strong it is as an institution, its ability to deliver on that promise.
Thank you all very much, and I look forward to our committee working together to really make sure that we're uplifting our educational institutions, especially these community colleges, and we work with our new administration to make sure we send that message to them. And I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. This is certainly a hearing that's important to me and my great state of West Virginia. I wanted to start off by pointing out a program that we did in West Virginia, and also I'd like to note that I am somebody who went to trade school. I used to be a welder. I actually started off in a mining operation, and somehow I got here. But in any event, a program that we set up, and I used to be the state treasurer of West Virginia, was called the Jumpstart Savings Program. And what this program allowed, and I found this in my own career, is that it wasn't so difficult perhaps paying for the education itself, but it was after graduation, the incurred expense getting into the workforce. Now, this might not necessarily be the fact, certainly for Mr. Parker and Toyota and the program that they have, but I'll give you an example in that field, would be an auto mechanic. So when an auto mechanic comes out of school, they're paying for all their own tools, right? And those can be thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. It's very expensive to get going. And we started this program called the Jumpstart Savings Program that allowed individuals even before college, or pardon me, before trade school, to put money away to save for tools, equipment, licenses, certifications, and new business startup costs. So licenses, you could think of CDLs and things like that. And this program I started, it really made a great impact, and it was actually endorsed by our trade unions and then also endorsed by our Chamber of Commerce in West Virginia, which is not common to have that happen, because certainly there are requirements and needs not only with the trade unions, but also with our folks who are non-union in West Virginia. And so this allows them to save money. We have hundreds of participants in this program already, but there are inherent barriers for a lot of folks to get going in the workforce. If you're from a rural state like mine, and even though perhaps the unions might supply a lot of the tools and equipment that you might need, you don't have a vehicle, right? And that becomes difficult to be able to get around. We don't have public transportation in West Virginia, right? It's if you don't have a vehicle, you're not going to work. And so we allow for them to be able to buy that. Now, part of and I will be introducing legislation to this effect, we had a lot of tax savings in terms of their income tax they could write off as they put the money in and deduct the money out. But we were trying to mirror it after the 529 college savings program, which, you know, the magic in that one is the capital gains tax not being there. Now, they didn't pay capital gains tax in the state, but they still had to pay it federally, which is why we had the tax incentives. In any event, this is a piece of legislation that I'm going to introduce that I think could really be beneficial to everybody across the country. But what are your thoughts and what are your thinking about those types of barriers of getting into the workforce, particularly people that are trying to go out on their own and work like me? I thought at one point I was going to start my own kind of mobile welding business, but it was really expensive. And you need to have that incurred cost there, and I didn't have credit because I was so young. What are your thoughts about that? And we could just take it in kind of sequential order here. And does this sound like a program like the Jumpstart Savings Program that I'm speaking about right here, something that you'd be interested in looking more into and perhaps being supportive of?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. I absolutely do believe that we need to be thinking about those barriers that students face after college in terms of getting into the workforce. And I often think there's not enough attention paid to what are those next steps, those next expenses that you need to undertake, particularly around licensing. You know, what fees do you need to pay for the license? You know, how long do you have to spend if you have your education, before you can actually work independently in that field? And I think that sounds like a very interesting proposal. I'd very much be interested in learning more. I would also note that one of the benefits of the 529 program is to provide a ready-made savings vehicle to get people thinking about, you know, these expenses that are going to come down the road, so that they're not necessarily surprised with a huge bill that they're not able to pay. So I would absolutely be willing to chat more with your office about that proposal.
Now you just remind me of something that was really interesting, because I ran the 529 college savings program for the state, and we found all this stagnant money where people just stopped going to college, and we created a tax-free rollover where they could roll their 529 money into a Jumpstart account and then go to trade school instead, where they've stopped going to college because for whatever reason, they didn't see the utility in it. But in any event, please, Madam President.
Congressman Moore, I could see the tremendous benefits of having an investment such as that. I can think of one example from our college in particular. Cosmetology is often held up as a low-wage job, and it might be if you go to work for Supercuts that's inside of Walmart. But most of our students are going to become entrepreneurs. They're not reflected in the wage data because they are business owners. So having a fund available to help them with startup costs, as minimal as they are, makes a huge difference. I have another example of a rapid training program that we have in Alabama called Skills for Success. We also have a foundation called Paths for Success Foundation, which does just exactly those kinds of things. We had 5 men go through our heavy equipment class who were in a recovery program. So the Paths for Success Foundation was able to buy some tools and safety shoes and things like that for them, which made a difference to them because they could not have done that on their own. So that sounds like an idea that's really worth pursuing.
Yeah, and to be clear, cosmetology, any of these, I mean, you could be a chef, you could be, it's all eligible in the state where we do it.
Congressman Moore, thank you for the question, and I completely agree. This sounds like a very well-targeted proposal. We would love to explore it with you more. This question of how to help people with that transition into the work, into their career, which sometimes does require extensive equipment, is definitely one that is a problem, and I'm glad to hear that you are addressing it. So, would love to explore more.
Congressman, I think I would agree with the rest of the panel that we can remove barriers to advancement, to educational and job advancement. It helps everyone who is in the game. In Fame, as an example, we actually there we go. In Fame, as an example, in our employer-led collaboratives, we actually cooperate with all of the parties that are playing to understand what those barriers are and how we can work together, whether that's through a formal process or an informal process, to help students get beyond that. In principle, I think we would support any action or act that would help to further remove those barriers.
Well, thank you all for that. Thank you for the answers to the questions. And unfortunately, you can't co-sponsor things, but maybe some of my colleagues, if they're interested, might want to think about it. So with that, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for holding this important hearing. I think almost all members of this panel are in vehement agreement that this is a really important topic. So thank you for your leadership on this, and thank you, everybody, for attending. It really frustrates and breaks my heart when I spend a lot of time meeting with young high school students, community college students in my district, and ask them what they're going to do after they graduate, and they look around and say, we're not sure we can find a job that really employs us at the wage we need across our district. And then right after that, I'll spend time with our business leaders and ask them what's going on and what's stopping them from expanding across our region, and they'll tell me we can't find the employees. And that's really frustrating because essentially what we're saying is that the skills we're teaching in our high schools and community colleges are not necessarily the ones that our business community often needs. That matching program is really broken, and I think career technical education is a really important part to make sure that we can fix it and make sure that the same things that people are learning in school are what folks are actually needing to get a route to the middle class afterwards. We have a number of really successful programs already in our district, as many of the members here have already highlighted in theirs as well. San Joaquin A+ is a leading educational organization. They surveyed employees across the San Joaquin Valley recently, and 100% of the employers that they surveyed said that career education needed to be a higher priority for schools. They've also talked to many of those employers about what's actually holding them back, because the reality is many of our employers are not participating in these programs because of some of the barriers, either because it's too expensive and the cost burdens are too high, or because of the red tape. My office is exploring a number of ways to see what we can do to reduce those cost burdens, be them tax incentives for employers that are actually participating in career education. But I'd love to hear from the panel. I think a lot of schools want to do this and are moving towards this, but oftentimes it feels like the bottleneck towards progress is employers, especially employers a little smaller than Toyota, actually having the resources to move forward. So what's stopping us on the employer side from more progress here? Anybody in the panel have an idea?
Thank you, Congressman. One of the big constraints is also on the supply side of colleges. There was a study done actually on the California community college system, which looked at changes in labor market demand for various occupations. And they found that students were very sensitive to changes in demand. When there's more need for healthcare workers, more students want to enroll in the healthcare programs. Unfortunately, there's not necessarily a supply response on the part of the colleges, that there's not more course sections being created, there are not more faculty being hired in these fields to meet that student demand. And so that's why I would argue that we also need to be looking at the supply side of what community colleges are doing, perhaps creating more direct incentives, direct financial incentives for schools to expand these high demand programs and also have the capacity available to expand when necessary.
Thank you. Dr. Karlowicz, any ideas of what we can do to support our community colleges expanding on that supply side?
I think I probably don't have more to add than Mr. Cooper. I think he addressed that very well.
Okay.
Thank you.
As a former community college instructor, I have a real heart for our community colleges, so thank you for the tremendous work that you do. Dr. McCarthy?
Really good at this. Okay, thank you, Congressman Harder. And it is such a great question and such an enduring challenge. And again, this relationship between the programs at the community college and what employers need is an ongoing dynamic situation that needs constant conversation, which is, again, this is why it's so important that we be able to fund the kind of industry partnerships and sectoral partnerships at community colleges are so important for maintaining those lines of communication. I will say two things in response to. I think one of the things that in some of the really high demand fields that are sort of in demand and where employers have a hard time retaining their employers, sometimes what the work that needs to be done is on addressing the quality of the jobs for which they're having a hard time retaining their employers. So I do know that California's done some really interesting work around high road training partnerships. And just again, this question of if the issue is that you're bringing people in and they're leaving really quickly, is that a skills problem or is that a job quality problem? So that is something that we need to look at. I also think, again, practices like apprenticeship and on-the-job learning, they ask a lot of employers in terms of being able to develop those internal systems and provide the mentorship and register the programs. And again, having a lot of resources available to support employers as they're doing that. It also can be hard for community colleges to stand up, to go through those processes. So again, it is right-sizing what's happening at the community college on the supply side with what employers need is just, it needs to be supported through constant dialogue on both sides. And I think our Perkins and our workforce development systems are well suited to doing that.
I think speaking from the, I've got one that works. I think speaking from the employer side, first, just if I recall correctly, to answer one aspect of your question, what are some of the forces that may cause employers to be less participative? And you actually already recognize those. I can tell you that in the wider employer dialogue, there's concern about red tape. There is concern about cost. We always think about cost. There's concern about what kind of resources that it may take to support a program that is done in collaboration with that. That being said, I'm going to come back to something I've already noted several times, and I noted it as such in my testimony too, and it's one of the transformative elements is employers and coming together and working together. It's that employer collaborative. So among other things that occur when you have that, smaller employers that perhaps didn't have the resources or the scope or the experience to know how to work with this or to know how to approach it or to create something that could be sustained at the college, when you come together and you combine all of your resources, then we have a critical mass that the college can address and work. And then everyone benefits, everyone, including all the employers, is engaged. Students are educated, and they fill those gaps. Dropout rate is lower. And so you see a number of dynamics that this collaborative effort comes together to do. I might give one quick example, just at a very high level. The FAME chapter in California is relatively new. They just announced a few months ago. Part of the dynamic that had occurred there, some of the employers that are now there in education kind of grown apart. I don't know if they were in opposition, but employers certainly were not seeing a connection with it and were not working on their own to some degree. The Manufacturing Institute came in, initiated a dialogue, brought those employers together, and that became the start of that new chapter in California. And now you're going to have this engagement that we've already noted from all parties that's going to actually produce something that's tangible with results.
Horowitz. It is my understanding that research has found that students that are due dual enrollment are likely to finish sooner, or at least finish within 6 years. I know y'all do a dual enrollment program, and just briefly, like I said, very briefly, since we're short on time, is there been specific ways where you have seen this been very beneficial to the students and how they, in their completion of their degree?
Absolutely, Congressman Adderholt. Probably 15 years ago, we were able to secure a National Tech Prep Demonstration Project grant. We also have been the recipient of Dual Enrollment Experimental Pell, but I'll speak to the Tech Prep Demonstration Grant. We built what's called a Fast Track Academy, which is an early college program, where juniors and seniors finish their high school diploma and their associate degree on our campus as full-time students. Their graduation rate is about 20 points higher than our native students. In addition, there are no gaps between ethnic groups or racial groups or male, female, or majors, or, you know, that sort of thing. So dual enrollment is a good investment because not only does it improve their opportunity to graduate on time, but it also puts them in the workforce about 2 years earlier. So that increases their earnings potential substantially.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ranking Member DeLauro, would you like to make some closing comments?
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. No, well, I can't guarantee that, but we'll get to it quickly. I just, too, like my colleagues have mentioned, it's an extraordinary commentary here this morning, in that I think we can get a sense of security about the value of community colleges and their value to our future, the success of the participants in the program, but the success of our economy and where our economy is going. And you're leading the way. And with the outcomes that you spoke about, Mr. Cooper, that they may be better than the four-year colleges and what people are doing. And the mission that each one of you has to make sure that you are providing every single opportunity for a youngster and for community colleges, what I'm going to go into in a second. You know, they're not 18-year-olds or 17-year-olds. It's a different population. So I want to thank you for your commitment, for the commitment of employers and the community college system to move forward and take the lead on what's happening in our educational system today. The goal and the mission is, you know, as you so clearly stated, pathways to employment and to a living wage, to be able to deal with the cost of living, which is the single biggest issue we face in this nation today. It's about how do people cope. People live paycheck to paycheck, and they're looking about how they're going to survive economically. You build that ladder of opportunity to the middle class, and thank you for that. To vulnerable people, to working people, you make that possible. You have testified community colleges that we turn to work with employers, to develop trusted pathways, as I said, to deliver those outcomes. This is who we are talking about. The Americans who study at community colleges, who are looking for an opportunity. The student is older, an average age of 27. 8% are 40 years or older. 57% of students are women. More than 20% of the students are parents. 13% are single parents. Yesterday, I spoke with a young woman in my office about the importance of community colleges, a veteran that suffered injuries while deployed and going back to school using Pell. These are the people who are affected by the Department of Education. And what she told me was defunding education, and it's a quote, would be an injustice to me and to many others like me. The lifelines that the schools and the students count on, understand, you don't have to take my word for it and the word of my colleagues. Listen to the news, as you do, read the papers, page 319 of Project 2025. Eliminate the Department of Education. But that's not only where that goes, that's one piece. The programs that of the greatest value to you and the work that you do are really on the chopping block. Yes, it's a reality here. That's why my colleague, Mr. Pocan, said it's a little bit surreal. We're talking about how successful you are, and at the same time, the backdrop is, let's be done with the federal involvement in these programs. No one is suggesting that we determine your curriculum or we determine anything else. The states will do that. We are here to provide resources for the opportunities that you provide. But House Republicans, this is a fact, look at the appropriations bills. Don't take my word for it, of what's being cut. Look at what Presidents Musk and Trump are talking about. In their 2025 appropriations bill, this is what House Republicans are proposing. $1.7 billion, these are lifelines. $1.7 billion cut to the WIOA state grants. $135 million to registered apprenticeships. $1 billion cut to campus-based student aid. $73 million elimination of grants to support student parents with childcare, to allow them to be able to go to school, to be able to go to work, and to be able to succeed. And with the President Musk's unlawful termination of $1 billion in appropriated education contracts and grants, the wreckage has only begun. They really are on a precipice of illegally dismantling the United States Department of Education, gutting the Department of Labor workforce programs. We're the Appropriations Committee. We have been entrusted by the United States Constitution in Article 1 that the Appropriations Committee has the power of the purse. We come together. It's one of the only areas in which to keep this government open. Democrats and Republicans, both the House and the Senate, have to come together to agree on the bills, pass them, and then we send it to the president for a signature. The law of the land. We made decisions about where the money should go based on a lot of different factors, including things that you're talking about here today. That is what is being dismantled. And as the ranking member on the Appropriations Committee, as a former chair of the Appropriations Committee, I'm not going to sit around and let that happen. Appropriations Committee is the center of this government. If we don't get it right, this government shuts down. And I don't want to do that. That's the last thing I want to do. I want to get us across the finish line. If we need to deal with existing programs and look at improving those programs, there have been some suggestions and ideas, let's look at that. Let's gather that data and figure out what works best. You know, the bipartisan continuing resolution we passed in December originally included the reauthorization of WIOA that would do exactly that. It was the reauthorization of the program. Unfortunately, and I'll continue to label him, President Musk tried to blow up that legislation. And the WIOA reauthorization was a senseless casualty of what happened. That is the example going forward. And I would just say, if we want to take a look at waste and fraud and abuse in these programs, I asked you to take a look at predatory for-profit colleges and for-profit charter schools that waste federal funds, and the outcomes are lower employment opportunities, lower wages, what you were talking about, Mr. Cooper. Let's look at all of these avenues. I am a strong supporter of community colleges. I believe in what you do. I believe in the difference that you are making for young people, older people that don't want to go to a four-year liberal arts college. That's good if you can do it. That's what I did, but hell, that's not the only way to help people realize their dreams and their aspirations. You help people realize their dreams and aspirations, and what this body needs to be doing is to assist you in doing that and not cutting the rug out from under you and what it is that you try to do for our students today. Thank you. Help us, is what I'm saying. And I think everyone on this panel supports community colleges here. That's what the discussion has been about. And you have made it real here today. Help us so that we don't cut off your opportunities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging me.
Thank you. Well, with that, I want to thank each of our guests today for your comments, your attentives, to the questions and answers, and we look forward to working with you. And with that, we stand adjourned.
Good.